Alright, my name is Charlie Stewart. You're at the Kerrville Folk Festival, one of the most legendary music festivals in the entire state. An 18-day festival, nobody can tell you any different. And there's a certain degree of magic that goes on. And not by any small imagination, the experience of our leader, Dallas the Empress Allen. She is, music magic personified. Not to mention the legendary Rod Kennedy, who, without him, this entire shindig would not be possible. He has brought some of the finest singer-songwriters that you people know out in public. Lyle Lovett started here. Steve Earle started here. Guy Clark. Numerous others, including Nancy Griffith. So if you want to have a great time, come out to the Kerrville Folk Festival. Well, Rod Kennedy was the owner of the ABC affiliate in Austin, Texas. And he had some radio station holdings as well. And he was putting out some events in the park. And then they went so successfully, he decided to open a club called the Checkered Flag with legendary folk performer and Kerrville Folk Festival legend, Alan Dameron. And they had such good fun at the clubs, and Lily Towns was there, and Steve Fromholtz, and a lot of the legendary guys you'll hear about in the Texas music pantheon. They decided to full forward, and the Kerrville Arts Festival, which was the arts festival that still goes on to this day, it's more like a carnival, things like that, asked Rod to provide some music. And that year went so successful that Rod decided to do his own festival, which was at the Convention Center in 1972. So that's why it says Celebrating Songwriters since 1972 on all our shirts and things, because that was the actual year they count. We didn't move out to the Quiet Valley Ranch until 1974. And it's been going, it started out as 2 weekends and eventually went to 3 weekends. And in fact, we even had a crazy year, which was our 25th anniversary, and we did 25 days of music in Kerrville Folk Festival, which was pretty amazing. And there's all sorts of magic that happens on this ranch. And the other guy that you have to talk about contributing to the Kerrville Folk Festival, who started our legendary New Folk contest, is Peter Yarrow. Peter Yarrow was working with Rod and told Rod about the Newport Folk Festival and what was going on there. And he talked to Rod into hosting the New Folk Festival.
That's nice. That's good.
My Kerrville story is, my father was in the music business in Lubbock, Texas. He was a top DJ in Lubbock, Texas from 1950 to 1960. He was a pallbearer at Buddy Holly's funeral. He knew Sonny Curtis, and he also introduced Waylon Jennings to Buddy Holly. So I was enthralled with the music business my entire life, and more than anything, I wanted to play. But being I had cerebral palsy, I couldn't. And then a friend of mine said, "Charlie, you're a knucklehead. It's called the music business. Just because you can't be in the music part doesn't mean you can't be in the business part." And I was really good at making my points known and email and business things. And I have a really good business acumen, so I decided to get into the business section of it. So that's how I formed my business, Handshake Management. That if I hadn't shown up here 18 years ago in 1995, thereabouts, none of this would have happened. The magic I found and my sole purpose in life, I found right here at the Kerrville Folk Festival. I was reborn as a human adult with a business acumen. At the Kerrville, how did you come here the first time?
I was living with Stephanie Corby in New York City, platonically, which we always take great points for some reason to point out. Living in New York City, she was my roommate, and she said, "You got to come to Kerrville." And she used to go had gone with Kevin So and Eric Gerber from the Boston crew. And so, all right, I'll check it out. And I came, and I had just written a song, not likely to make it on the air if I tell you the name of it at this time, but I walked into Can't Miss Inclined, never seen these people before, and played the song, and their looks of horror, and the punchline came to looks of joy and elbowing each other, and I said, "These are my people." That's how I got there.
Well, thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Well, you have to find your voice first. You can write great stories and you can have great ideas, but until you find the delivery system that works for you, that's the important key. There's a lot of people that want to sound like Johnny Cash or they want to sound like Jimmy Buffett, and they have great songs, but until they're true to their own voice and their own spirit, it's not really going to work for them. So have a voice of your own. is probably the most important thing.
Why is it so significant?
Well, the path to Kerrville, you know, along with it being the magic of the music, is it's a very unique opportunity for singer-songwriters. Any singer-songwriter can enter the New Folk contest, unless you've performed at the Kerrville Folk Festival before. And there's been many people who have built a career around the New Folk Festival, which was inspired by the Newport Folk Festival. When this initially started, New Folk wasn't part of it. But Peter Yarrow, who was very familiar and sat on the board of Newport, talked to Rod and said, there's not a way for new kids to break into the business. So why don't we go ahead and start a contest? And the New Folk contest is you have 2 songs that you submit, and you go through a process after process, and it goes from 800 to 400, from 400 to 64, and from 64 to 32, and from 32 they pick 6 winners, which you call the New Folk finalists. And at the end of every competition year, near the fall, there is a specific tour that's for those 6 artists, and they go to 4 or 5 festivals. John Gorka is a past winner. Nancy Griffith started at New Folk. Lyle Lovett, Guy Clark, Steve Earle, Townes Van Zandt. They all, if they had to know where their seed was planted, their seed was planted right here at the Quiet Valley Ranch. And those trees have produced oaks and acorns for miles and miles. 3, 2, 1. In the 1960s and early 70s, Rod Kennedy was a powerful media force in Austin. He owned a couple of radio stations, he owned the ABC affiliate, and in fact, Rod Kennedy, as a little side note, he hosted the premiere of the Batman movie starring Adam West. And that was one of the events he planned. He was legendary for planning events, and he was doing some concerts in the park in association with his radio station. Well, the Kerrville Community Arts Fair asked him to provide some musicians so they could have their art fair where they're having Ferris wheels and arts and this and that. And the stage was so giving. I mean, there were so many people there to listen to the music. He thought maybe he could do a music event on his own. So in the community center in 1972, and that's why almost all our t-shirts and things say celebrating songwriters since 1972, that was the first one. In 1974, everyone was allowed to discover the majesty of the Quiet Valley Ranch. And that's where we opened the ranch, and it's kind of how the festival is known today. But if it hadn't been for Rod Kennedy, there was literally thousands and thousands of careers it wouldn't have happened. If there is such a thing as, the godfather of folk music, especially in Texas, it would have to be Rod Kennedy. You would put him in the same vein as you would Doug Weston at the Troubadour in LA, or the Fillmore. Those guys were pantheons of what they do, and Rod Kennedy is a pantheon of the Texas Americana folk music scene. Probably bigger than, they talk about Bonnaroo and this festival and that festival, but the sense of community. And not only a sense of community, but for 18 days, the Quiet Valley Ranch becomes a metropolitan city. Everybody has an address. You know exactly where Camp Sweetness and Light is. You know exactly where Camp Stupid is. You know exactly where Camp Nashville is. And they're hallmarks of the ranch. And established camps are very important. And a lot of the time, people come, there's a few people, mostly tourists, that come for the main stage acts. But most of the hardcore Kerrverts, as we call ourselves, jam around the campfires. And you never know who's going to be discovered. And in fact, almost 25 years or so ago, there was a little girl who worked the Mixmaster. I don't know if you've taken a shot of the Mixmaster yet, but where the parking lot happened. And she was playing songs, and this English gentleman thought she was really amazing. And he had one of the first recordable Walkmans. And he recorded some of her songs that night. He went back to England and released them. And they got an overwhelming response in England. And that girl turned out to be Michelle Schacht, who's had a significant career. Volunteer. And I have a friend of mine And these guys, they wear tie-dyes and everything. I have a friend of mine, he wears skirts, and you'll see a lot of guys wear skirts out here. He says that's the only place that he can wear skirts and nobody says anything to him about it. And really, you can do almost anything in Kerrville within valuable reason. Kerrville is one of the few places you can be who you truly are. All of us wear masks at one point in our life, you know, whether it's the businessman or the family man or whatever. Kerrville, there are no masks. You can be absolutely who you are, and you're generally fully accepted.
And people come here, and instead of paying for a ticket, they'll volunteer and get to come in for volunteering.
They'll volunteer. The staff, in fact, they even have a staff concert, which, you know, it happens in the last weekend. And they put their names in, and all the staff members vote for who they want on their staff concert. But like I said, the staff is very important. As I mentioned earlier with Michelle Schacht, if she hadn't been working the volunteer staff at Mixmaster doing the parking lot, she might not have ever had the career that she had. And it's more than just people saving money. People are on crews for years and years and years. And sometimes you have a lot of people that I wouldn't say are abnormal, but they're dysfunctional within the realm of normal society. And when they've come to Kerrville, they've found a family. So if they're working the Cokes crew or the Bear crew or whatever crew that is, sometimes that carries over into their family in real life. When something happens to them, if they don't have any other family, they're homeless, you know, they haven't got along with their parents in years and years and years, they will share the special memories with their Kerr family, people that are on their crew, like the first baby, the first grandchild. There's a lot of things, especially with the advent of Facebook as of lately, you know, the Kerrville family has carried on electronically and digitally. This year alone, there was a brand new thing called the Kerrville Rideshare. So if you're in Palm Springs or San Francisco and you're trying to get to the festival, you could connect with somebody that was coming. And it's very much about community. This may be the most community-oriented music event in the entire face of the world. It is certainly the largest. It is 18 days.
So, the changing of the guard.
Well, that happened about 10 or 12 years ago. I'm not exactly for sure because I don't have the book in front of me. But Rod had a little health scare, and some things happened, and we were taken over more by a board of directors, and they placed maybe the most vital and powerful tool in the Kerrville Folk Festival's history since Rod, which is who we call the Empress, Dallas Allen. She was Rod's number 2 for many years, and when she took over and he kind of gave her the torch, handed off the torch, she went like there was no gap. It was smooth, it was amazing, and she brought an extra dose of magic to the ranch. And under her tutelage, there's a lot of things happening. Like she brought in a kids camp. It's in June or July that teaches kids how to be songwriters. And it's for kids between the ages of 12 and 14. And some of the innovations that she has put in place for the ranch has made not only the ranch more viable and more marketable, but her choice in music and musicians is on par.
Okay.
I'll talk about old school and work that in.
Okay.
One of the other amazing things about the Kerrville Folk Festival is early on, it produced live performance recordings from the stage. From 1970 through almost right now, there is an archive of albums and eventually CDs, and pretty much is going to be going to digital there. And now, if you see Steve Earle, he's not playing, don't get excited. If you see him on stage, an hour and a half or 2 hours later, you can buy the performance that you just saw. They're selling live CDs of the performances you saw. So if you saw somebody you really grooved on Thursday, well, before you leave this camp area or the staging area, you can purchase that CD and have it for the car ride home. And that's one of the amazing things about technology that's been happening. The other thing is, of course, the smartphone. The smartphone and the ease of cameras, especially now that you can get HD cameras and iOS and everything like that, the biggest tool available for up-and-coming songwriters in the last few years is social media. Between Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube, things have truly changed. Especially YouTube, because you can sit in a relatively decent environment with a relatively decent camera, and you can send a video of a song to a venue operator. So not only are they hearing you, they can see you. For many, many years, a lot of venues wouldn't book new and upcoming musicians because they said, well, we're not going to hire anybody that we can't see live. Well, now you have the ability to show them a live performance and to show the nuances and little things that make you you. Whether it's a little guitar flourish or a little smile or a little wink of the eye that would set you apart from anyone else. YouTube makes that happen. And as far as Twitter goes, you can increase your audience by 20 or 30%, because the enemy to any venue is people who go home. If you get a girl in her fat girl pants or you get a guy in his lazy boy, chances of them coming out are nil. But at 2 or 3 o'clock in the middle of the day, if you Twitter and you say, hey, we're going to have a happy hour gig at such and such bar, they'll say, hey, why don't we go have a beer and see Matt Harlan, Brian Kalanick, one of those guys. And then we can go home after that. And it stops the interruption. And so bar gigs and happy hour gigs can increase exponentially the audience because they gave them a simple reminder about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Kerrville and Newport and a lot of these other things inspired a new organization. Well, not new, but it's about 25 or 30 years old. It's called the International Folk Alliance. And the International Folk Alliance is broken up into 5 things. There's NERFA, which is the Northeast. There is SWERFA, which is the Southwest. There is SURFA, which is the Southeast. And then there's one for Canada, and the Midwest is called FARM. And out in California, it's Far West. And this organization is formed and inspired by what happened at Kerrville, what happened at Newport, and things like that. It is a national folk organization. And what you do, there's regionals that you go to, wherever region you live in, and then the International Folk Alliance. For 5 years, it was in Memphis. Last year, it was in Toronto. And all of a sudden now, it's going to be moved to Kansas City. And that's kind of, if Kerrville and the festival scene is a bachelor's degree, then your graduate degree comes from Folk Alliance, because not only does Folk Alliance give you performance opportunity, that gives you opportunity to listen to Roger McGuinn as a keynote speaker and do some workshops. And how do I do publishing? How do I manage my royalties? So it gives you a more advanced look beyond the music as well.